Live stream webinar.
So thank you everyone who's sitting here waiting and ready to listen. We're just going to launch this on Facebook and make sure that's all working okay.
Susan?
Sitting here waiting and ready to listen. We're just going to launch this on Facebook and make sure that's all working okay.
Susan?
Sitting here waiting and
Yep. That was you playing back.
It was.
Yeah, it was just when you launch this on Facebook Live, it comes back up on Facebook Live, and of course you're getting the you're getting the feedback. So just had to make sure it was working, and then we shut down Facebook. And
so you don't get feedback in the strange gap. Yes.
It's really weird, but it is the only way to do it. And last time we did it, unfortunately, we didn't do it quite right. So I think so let me introduce everyone. Thank you so much for joining us on chrisandsusan.tv. This is our show where we interview amazing entrepreneurs and people from all walks of life who have experiences they want to share with you to help you develop your business in any way that you see from these shows. Now, this is a very, very special show because it's actually our 6th anniversary, because we launched this show in 2011.
Yeah, we did.
And even more special, which you won't know this, our special guest, who I will introduce in a minute, we interviewed Bob Berg exactly 2 years ago to the day.
Oh, really?
Yeah, and we said when we were talking to him and we were talking about a very special book that we'll talk about in a moment, we said we would love to interview your co-author. And he said, you're not likely to be able to do that because he's quite shy and he doesn't like to be on the screen. But you know what? We're entrepreneurs and we never give up. What better introduction to our guest tonight? He is John David Mann. He is a prolific author. We'll let you tell you a little bit about his story in a minute, but he is most famously known in the entrepreneurial world for co-authoring The Go-Giver with Bob Berg, which is this book here. Now, it's very well thumbed, and we were first given this when we got into network marketing back in 2005. And it was just one of those books that we really got. In our business, we're management consultants and accountants, and we work with small businesses. And we very much realized that the more value you give somebody, the better it's going to be for everybody going forward. So we certainly understood that. So our special guest tonight is John David Mann. Welcome, John.
Well, thank you so much. Great to be here.
So I picked out a phrase from my little bit of research because I do like to get to know our guests. And this phrase is, and I'm sure you will know it very well, you are known for saying, amazing, that's exactly what I do. So what a way to start. Perhaps you could explain how that expression came about.
Amazing, that's exactly what I do. That sounds like it has some kind of history in the networking world.
It does.
And so I guess our connection goes back long before The Go-Giver, because we go back into that primeval soil of the network marketing world, which is where I was cutting my teeth and sort of learning how the world works back in the 1980s and 1990s. So, you know, I love what you're doing, and it's amazing. It's exactly what I do.
It's fantastic. So thank you so much. I mean, what a history have you got? I mean, like, you've written, co-authored all of these books. You're an amazing storyteller, but yet you have a huge entrepreneurial background. And I've just written down these few things that you've done, just so that everybody watching this knows that they are listening to someone with a lot of experience. So you have... Oh, you say you never planned to go into business. You formed a school, a food distribution business, a graphic design business, and 2 publishing companies. That's a lot for someone who isn't that entrepreneurial. So congratulations.
Oops. Yeah, it's, you know, I have, I mean, my parents were wonderful mentors and wonderful role models and you know, and great figures in my life. And I learned a lot about leadership from my dad and from my mom, but neither of them had particularly a business background. Business was, business as we think of it, entrepreneurship, was just not part of my family experience, my makeup, my skill set or anything. So, as I became an adult and forayed my way out into the world, learning about the world of business was like learning, Chinese or Greek or some language I most certainly did not speak. So it still feels weird hearing all these decades later to be writing about business and not, classical composition or how to play the cello or how to, conduct a choir.
I mean, that I absolutely found amazing when I was reading your blog, that you actually are a very accomplished cellist, plus you've written some phenomenal music, and your actual background, your family background, is all musical.
Yes. Yeah. Musical and academic. I mean, my parents were both teachers. My father was a college professor and a musicologist, as well as an active choral conductor. And my mom was a English teacher, history teacher, drama teacher, wrote a lot of her own plays to do with her kids, with her school kids, taught middle school. Brought a class of students to Greece when I was in 8th grade, and I was one of those students, so that was an exciting thing to do. So yeah, writing, academics, and music, that's all like second nature to me, but dollars and cents is a different thing.
So somewhere along the line, there must have been something that switched from, I mean, how did you get from music to writing books and
there was a turning point, which was the experience of poverty. There came a time very early in my life when I realized that I really didn't particularly care for being broke. And as a teacher and as a musician, I mean, there were career options available to me as a composer. I guess I could have gone to Hollywood and become a film scorer. I could have gotten a job on university somewhere as a composition teacher. So there were paths there, but I really had a hunger, both to understand how things worked, that's always been my fascination in business. It was my fascination in networking. It was my fascination in entrepreneurship. It's my fascination in business leadership, is to understand the nature of the beast, sort of figure out the rules of the road and explain those in a way that ordinary people could just get. Like in business, it doesn't get more ordinary than me, because I am no business superstar, not by background, not by training, not by temperament. So I always had a fascination with understanding how this thing works. And I also, frankly, didn't want to be broke, didn't want to have to scrounge for my family. I mean, there is that motivation of wanting to do well. Want to be able to afford the life that we want to be able to afford for ourselves, for our spouse, for our kids. So I wanted to do well, I wanted to do good, and I wanted to understand how it all works.
Wow. That's some
I'm not saying I succeeded in any of those.
No, but I think pretty much that's how most successful entrepreneurs come to be successful. They've gone through that kind of journey. Yeah. And I think it's being able to share that journey from where they were, through the hardships they went through, to coming out the other side, that can actually help other people. I know certainly we speak a lot for some of the companies that we work with, and we travel around. We just come back from Sydney, and prior to that we were in Singapore, and we're off to the States next month. But we teach the method of storytelling in marketing and in entrepreneurship, because so few people actually realize how important it is to share your story. Oh, yeah. And we certainly remember only wanting to talk about the good bits, never wanting to talk about the painful bits, because we were a little bit embarrassed. Well, no, we were very embarrassed and pretty ashamed of it. But actually, it's that pain that you go through, isn't it? I
have made a career out of talking about the painful bits.
Yes.
It's funny. One of the most interesting pieces of advice I ever got it was early in my writing career. Actually, I was writing a book called "You Call the Shots" for a young business prodigy, Cameron Johnson. Wonderful, wonderful man. We're still good friends. And I was talking with my editor, and she was editing a section that we were writing about public speaking, and she was adding some text, and she wrote in there about public speaking. She said, "It's okay to get nervous in front of a crowd. Just don't let anybody see you're nervous." And I thought, what singularly terrible advice. It is absolutely diametrically opposite from what I believe. In fact, I was so impressed by that I put it in the Go-Giver Leader. As Aunt Elle actually says that to Ben late in the book. She says, that was abysmal advice. She says, it was perfectly awful. She says, and it is, because if you hide the truth of your experience, as Deborah Davenport says in The Go-Giver, whatever business you're in, what you really have to offer most is yourself. Mm-hmm. And that's what people are there to buy. That's what people are there to learn from, to connect with. That's why, this age of social media has become such a powerful thing. People respond to authenticity. They respond to the reality of who you are. And that can be as coarse and crass as reality TV, where you just throw everything you are on the screen, all the worst pieces. But it can also be, the tragedies, the failures, the real painful difficulties that you experience can really be the most valuable learning experiences, not just for yourself, but for others. So we talk about that, about how The Go-Giver, was turned down 22 times and before it got published. And, our business is full of those stories, right? Jack Canfield and Mark Victor Hansen got turned down like 5,000 times or whatever before Chicken Soup and so forth. And the moral of the story is usually, no matter how many no's you get, keep pressing, keep hitting your head against the wall, because there's going to eventually be a yes. Well, sort of. I mean, that could be the moral of the story. But for me, the truth of that was, I'm kind of rambling here, but the truth of that was the first 12 or 13, 14 rejections we got for The Go-Giver, they were right to say no, because the book wasn't ready. And sometimes when people say no to us, they're not just because their eyes are closed. They may be right. They may have a point. Sometimes we get rejection because not our message is wrong, but we haven't refined it yet, or we haven't perfected it, or we haven't brought out all that it could be. It's not ready. The Go-Giver wasn't ready. We took it back and completely rewrote it for 9 months before we eventually took it back to publishers again and got another dozen rejections, and then it got published. But yeah, the painful bits, they're the best bits.
So I think I read there's a how did Pindar come about? I think it was your mum, wasn't it, if I remember rightly?
It's funny how these things happen. You have even when it's one author, it's often challenging to go back and reconstruct where things came from. When it's two, it's doubly challenging, because there's Bob and there's me. And a book like The Red Circle, the Navy SEAL memoir, well, that's Brandon Webb's life. I didn't. There are pieces of me in that book, but really it's his life. But The Go-Giver is kind of a 50-50 mix of Bob and me. There's a bunch of both of us in it. It's like two parents and their DNA all mixed up into the kids. So we sometimes have difficulty remembering who contributed what line or what concept or what idea. Bob had this idea of this mentor, this wise person. Mm-hmm. And he didn't have a name for the longest time. And, we eventually decided to call him the chairman. And then the name, we tried a bunch of names, but they were either too common or too weird. And, my mother was a teacher of Greek culture. She had a passion for ancient Greek civilization. And Pindar was, of course, a famous ancient poet. It was only actually after the book came out that it occurred to me that my composition teacher, when I was a kid in New York City, I studied music composition. I had a wonderful, wonderful teacher who just died last year at the age of 90, I think. And his name was Peter Pindar Stearns. So I had a mentor whose name was Pindar. Maybe that's where it came from. Anyway.
I think that's brilliant. But I mean, that's what stories are all about, isn't it? After all, it's sharing experiences and memories and how things change as they get told down the generations. You know, a bit like Chinese whispers. You say it one way, and sort of 10 people later, it's a different story altogether. I mean, we're fascinated by storytelling, and it was one of the real passions of why we wanted to bring you on the show, because you've written so much and so many diverse books, from fiction to non-fiction and to educational. You've helped a lot of other authors get their message out into the world.
Good. So, that's wonderful to hear. I will say that I think every book that I write, every book that anybody writes, but every book, even the most how-to nonfiction book, every book really is a story, tells a story. And what I mean by that is that there's a sense of hero's journey. There's a sense of a beginning, middle, and end, a sense of a struggle to overcome, or a goal to get to, or a difficulty to overcome. There's a sense of, of that arc, that story arc. And you know very well, every great in-person presentation has the elements of story in it. I think every book, I think every blog post, I think every email that we send, we don't have to be authors of books to be writers. These days, everybody's a writer, because we're all texting, or we're all emailing, or we're all posting social media, and that's all writing. It doesn't matter how long or short it is. In fact, I think sometimes the very best training we can get as writers is the shorter forms, the blog posts and the emails and so forth. So it's all stories. It's all how, a seeker wanting to overcome a challenge and reaching a goal. It's like the oldest story there is, Homer.
So how actually did you get from becoming a musician, if I can say that, a composer, to actually writing your first book?
It's a circuitous route.
I bet it
is. My career kept reinventing itself, and it wasn't really my intention. It's never been my intention, but things, I kept making plans, and other things kept happening. I went from music into nutrition and holistic health. It was very interesting to me. And then I went from there into business. Specifically network marketing. I got very involved in the networking world, Upline Magazine, Network Marketing Lifestyles, Networking Times, and so forth and so on. A bunch of books, The Slight Edge came out of that, and so forth. And all through all those things, you mentioned education. As a kid, I was involved in starting a school. All through those different paths, there were always people who had things that needed to get edited. There were always articles or journals or newsletters or that needed to be fixed, spruced up, needed to have their hair combed and their tie straightened before they went out in front of people. So I did a lot of editing, and in the networking world, I ended up doing a lot of editing. I kind of made that my profession for over a decade, where I was editing a lot of other people's stuff, which is, I think, the best training ground in a way for being a writer. Bob Berg ruined my career.
I'm sure I'd love to hear that.
I was headed for Hollywood. That was my plan. In 2004, I'd studied screenwriting with a wonderful teacher. I'd written the script. I was on the way to Hollywood. That was my plan. You know that they say this wonderful old expression, man plans and God laughs. Well, I have been the cause of a great deal of divine laughter, because I've had all kinds of plans, and they the other day I cataloged all of the best things in my life, and it was an easy list. Not including my parents and where I came from, but all the things that have happened in my life since I've been here. The Go-Giver is one of them. My wife, my marriage is one of them. All the partnerships and events and circumstances that have been the greatest blessings in my life. And I counted up how many of them were the result of my plan. And I came to a grand total of 0.
Wow.
Interesting.
None of the best things that have happened to me occurred because I planned it. Which I don't think that means we shouldn't have plans. I think we should have plans and goals. I think they're wonderful. They just aren't what's going to get us there. At least in my experience. So I was on my way to Hollywood, and Bob said, "Hey, listen, I would like your help." And I'd edited some things for Bob before. I said, "Sure. What do you want me to edit?" He says, No. I got this idea for a story, but it's not the kind of book that I write. He'd written like Endless Referrals, beautiful how-to and how to get more referrals in your business. And I had done some editing on that. And it was a great book, still is. He said, "But I write how-to stuff. This is a story. I don't know how to do this. I need you to write it with me, not edit it, write it with me." And I was like, I don't get this. Go giver instead of go getter. I mean, I get it, but I don't know. And I'm busy, and this is a distraction. It was like there was a mosquito in my ear buzzing, it's like, but I told my fiance, it's Bob. It's this dear, wonderful man. So I can't just say no. I have to at least go hear him out. So we went down to Florida, where Bob lives, one December, and visited him for a day, and sat around in his living room, kind of talking about the book. And I'd love to say that we had this exciting, inspired, passionate conversation, but it wasn't. It was kind of like this desultory sort of sitting around, popping out ideas and saying this and saying that. It was like this sort of idea session that didn't seem to really go very far. I just kind of circled it a little bit and fell to the floor.
It didn't get you excited?
Not especially. Went back home, and by 6 weeks later, I had a few free days, and I started kind of noodling around with the ideas that Bob had sent. And every book that I've ever done, there comes a moment where there's a passage that pops out of the page. It could be a scene, a bit of dialogue, whatever. A paragraph or two or three, which is like the conception of that story. And that's what happened. This day I was noodling around, and I drafted what became Deborah Davenport's speech to the auditorium, where she talks about the fourth law, the law of authenticity. We didn't have any laws or five anything concept. But this popped out. And I thought, this is cool. I like this. This feels real. This feels like it really exists. And I sent it off to Bob, and he went, "Oh, this is great." And he sent back some ideas to me. We went back and forth in email, and I would write, send it off to him. He would make comments, send it back. And in 6 weeks, we had a book, which then went through 2 years before it actually got to, into production at a publishing house. But in 6 weeks, we had our first draft, and we had a book. And that was, for me, I'd ghost written a few books for other people in the networking space, done some work with Paul Zane Pilzer, I think I'd done the first draft of The Slight Edge by that point, and a few other things, some work for Robert Kiyosaki, but I hadn't, that was my first real book with Bob. And my screenwriting career was destroyed. Which is a good thing for me, because I have a feeling it would have been a nightmare. Hollywood is a meat grinder, and so I'm delighted. It's been over a decade now and 24 books, and I'm having the time of my life.
You never know, you might still get Hollywood.
I was going to say, it's never too late. Never.
Hey, listen, just before this call, I put finishing touches on the marketing material on The Recipe, the book we're about to talk about. Yep. Because we have movie interests. So, hey, Hollywood could still be
wow. Oh, wow. That is so fantastic. I mean, let's talk about The Recipe, because honestly, it's so special. It's very different, but it has an amazing message. And I think for me, it bears an important message for not just anyone in their personal life experiences, but for entrepreneurs in particular, because of what he went through. So, okay, spill the beans. Tell us all about it.
The Recipe.
Yay.
The Recipe.
So the Recipe, as you say, it's completely different in a sense, and yet it's not different in a sense. It's not a carbon copy of the Go-Giver, but it's sort of a first or second cousin. It's a parable, you could say. It's a little more novelistic than the Go-Giver, but it's like The Alchemist or something like that. But it's a short novel, a parable about a young boy, 14-year-old boy named Owen, whose father has died, and he's torn up inside, and his life is circling the drain. He's getting in fights at school, about to be expelled, and things are looking dark. And he ends up vandalizing a property for which he has to go to work to pay back the owner, who is this crusty old diner chef. At that point, it becomes like the Karate Kid meets Master Chef. Life lessons, life learning ensues in the kitchen. I wrote this book with Chef Charles Carroll, who is an award-winning culinary Olympic gold medalist chef, extraordinary man. He is to cooking what Brandon Webb is to the military, what Bob Berg is to thought leadership and business. And this, like the Go-Giver, this book was Charles's idea. He had the idea for this story, which he pitched me this idea almost a decade ago, and I fell in love with the idea. So this is a joint enterprise. So it's different in that it takes place mostly in the kitchen. There's a lot of cooking. There are 14 recipes in the back of the book, recipes that are cooked during the course of the story. And just as Ralph Macchio learns about life in his karate lessons, Owen, in the course of learning the chef's 7 rules of the kitchen, gradually realizes that those are really 7 rules for living. They are the chef's recipe for a great life. So the book's subtitle is A Story of Loss, Love, and the Ingredients of Greatness. And I'm charmed that you said it's a book particularly, you think, apt for entrepreneurs, because we don't position this as a business book at all, which the Go-Giver we did. We called it A Little Story About a Powerful Business Idea. I sort of think of that like the Trojan horse, like we made it a business book, but actually hiding inside it, there's this little Greek army of, people use the Go-Giver in churches and synagogues and family counseling and schools. And it's really a life book, not just a business book. But the recipe, we're not presenting it as a business book. But I've been on already a number of podcasts where the hosts have said, hey, I've given this to my real estate team or to my entrepreneur team or whatever, because there's lessons in here about building your team, about serving your clientele, about how to create a business that isn't just excellent, but actually has an impact and serves with honor and so forth. So I'm thank you for saying that. I love it.
No, seriously. I mean, when I read, I skim read it first when I got the galley proof, and because I just wanted to get a feel for it. Yes. And then I reread it because that's just how I am, and I scribble over everything. I drive him mad. Every book we've got 2 of pretty much, because I destroy them. I turn the corners down. I highlight them. I mark them. And it was the same as I went through that. And that's when I realized that this actually, you may, as you say, may not have been designed as a business book or an entrepreneur's book. But as I started to read it, I thought, this is going to really help a lot of entrepreneurs understand the way of their business. Yes. Through the things that have happened as we saw them developing in the kitchen, and the recipe for success and everything. And it all just, to me, slipped into place. And I hope that everyone watching this, whether you're live on Facebook or whether you watch this afterwards, we'll give you the website where you can go and pre-order your copy, because it's pretty special. And I love the idea of what you're doing there.
Well, it's interesting. Chef Charles himself is I could spend our whole time together just telling you about his career. He's a fascinating guy, and he has in particular done a lot of extremely entrepreneurial things. He's this executive chef of one of the busiest country clubs in the United States. He's got a staff of 75 people that he manages. They do 80 to 100 events per week in 3 restaurants and 5 kitchens. I mean, it's a mammoth operation. He's like the commander of a battleship, right? Even at that, he is constantly doing mind-boggling projects, like in his spare time, as if he would have such stuff. Yeah. So he's an extremely entrepreneurial man, but his influence as an entrepreneur and my influence as an entrepreneur are both shot through this book. And it has kind of a funny structure. When you read the book, you might notice while you're reading or after you go back and look at it, it kind of comes in two halves. There's a sort of a midpoint in the book. And in the first half of the book, it's more of an internal journey in a way. The boy is very in himself. And the rules that he's learning and the principles are a lot about sort of self-development and self-refinement and personal greatness. In the second half of the book, it kind of goes out a little bit and talks more about the team, more about working for the world, and it becomes more of an external process. So that's really where the sort of the entrepreneurial flavor, permeates that expression.
I mean, I certainly, this is me talking personally from my experience as a child and what I saw reading the book and hearing Chef Carol's story through it, was about when you're told you can't do something, you jolly well go and prove it wrong. And I went through school life like that. I was not that bright. I worked very hard to get where I wanted to go, but I was in an all-girls school, very competitive, and unless you were a very high achiever and would be selected to go on to university or to become a doctor or a teacher, because that's what it was in when we grew up and went to school. There was nothing for anybody else. And I remember our headmistress was wonderful. She always used to say, aim high, Susan, aim high. And then on my leaving, she said, well, never mind, dear, you could become a secretary. I'm sure you'll be okay. And it's like, that was the fighting spirit. Like, no, yeah, I am going to be a secretary, but I'm going to be a damn good secretary, and I'm going to do other things with my life. And here we are now. So
Charles tells this great story. It's not in the book, but because there are a lot of things and there are a lot of elements in the book that are based on his life. He didn't lose his father at 14. He didn't throw a rock at a window, but a lot of the details in there come from his life. But he tells the story when he was 19. He competed in his first large-scale competition and a New England event, and he won a bronze medal, his first medal. And, a young kid, age 19, right out of high school, won his first bronze. And he was feeling on top of the world. Mm-hmm. And he was sitting there waiting for the judges to come by and judge all the other dishes. And this one judge came by and looked at his dish. And Charles blurted out to him, I'm going to go to the Olympics and win a medal. And the chef put his hand on his shoulder and said, son, it's hard enough just to get on the Olympic team. Why don't you aim lower and just focus on getting silver next time in the local events? And Charles was devastated. And so he milled around, he kind of shuffled from table to table, waiting for the thing to be over. And he went to another booth where he saw a chef that had a medal around his neck, gold medal. And he looked closer and it was an Olympic gold medal. And he said to the chef, is that like a real Olympic gold medal? And the guy said, yeah. Can I see it? And the chef said, better than that. He took it off and he put it around Charles's neck and said, here. So he put this medal around his neck, and he was on top of the world. And he told the guy what this first chef had said. And the guy said, who was it that said that? And Charles pointed him out and he said, oh yeah, he doesn't have a gold himself. Don't listen to him. And he says, you're doing everything right. Just keep doing what you're doing. Flash forward 5 years later, Charles is on a plane coming home from Germany with his first Olympic gold medal of his own that he's won. At the age of 24, he was the youngest on his team. Everyone on his team came home with gold medals, including Charles. And on the plane on the way home, he wrote a note to that chef saying, dear chef, thank you so much for inspiring me. I'm enclosing a snapshot of myself with my first gold medal. And then he asks the question, which chef do you think I sent the letter to? It was the one who told him not to try. just to be content with what he had. He said, you were the one who inspired me, because if you hadn't done that, I wouldn't have gotten that fighting spirit going. So
it's true that, and it is true.
The painful bits.
Yeah. And I think that's the sort of thing, through telling stories of other people's experiences like that, we can see ourselves in that same story, in that same position in our lives and in our businesses.
Yeah.
And that's what inspires other people to carry on when they get to the point maybe where they think, do you know what, this isn't going to work out. I'm not going to be able to do it.
You know, I'll tell you one more of those stories, which is, you know, I mentioned that the Go-Giver was rejected 22 times or so before somebody said yes and published it. The same thing happened with the recipe, but with a twist. The recipe, 40 publishers said no, until the 41st, who also said no. We never got a yes. Never did get to that yes. And so we were faced 6 months ago with a choice. Nobody picked it up. And we said, well, are they all right? Should we just forget about it? Just put it on the shelf and say, oh, well, next? Or do we take it on ourselves? So the question was, do we believe in the book? And do we believe there's a readership for the book? Well, the answer is yes. So the choice became, do it ourselves. I'm not a publisher. I don't know how that works. That's not my work. I write books. I don't publish them. And neither of us have time to do this. Neither of us have the skill set or experience to do it. So of course we're doing it. Mm-hmm. Well, so this is our first foray, and I formed a publishing company just to put this book out, and that's sometimes what, you know, an entrepreneur has to do. Do it yourself.
Yeah.
Go
on.
Well, you wanted to get it out, wasn't it? I mean, as you say, you believe in that book so much that, and there is an audience for it, and it has to get out there. And it's a question of, so, well, how do we get it out there? Because everybody else is saying no for whatever reason they have. But we're going to make sure it's going to get out there. And I think, you know, you're going to go back to 41 publishers eventually.
You're going to say, would you like
thank you for the inspiration.
You know, a lot of them were very sweet. I mean, a lot of them said, and a lot of them are people that we know, and a lot of them said, love the story, love the characters. The food sections are so vivid and mouthwatering, tantalizing. The life lessons are poignant. It doesn't fit our category. And in fact, we can't quite figure out what category it does fit. And that was the problem. And that's not an idle comment. I mean, when you're pitching a movie in Hollywood, or you're producing a book through New York, or you're, you know, producing a business, inventing a business, it's important to really know clearly, what business am I in? Who is my customer?
Yeah.
Well, we know who our reader is. It's people who love personal development and great food. What does that intersection look like? I think it looks like 100 million people.
I couldn't agree more. No.
They don't have that shelf at Barnes and Noble or at the big bookstores, but you know, we'll just have to invent it. So.
Yeah.
Oh, that's amazing, because it comes out when? 17th of October, is it?
October 17th. Yes.
And anyone listening, I've got the website. It is theingredientsofgreatness.com. So you can go there and you can pre-order your copy. And the best thing I love, but unfortunately it probably won't work for us in the UK, is that you can get your book and then send it back to you, I believe, and both you and Chef Carol will sign it. So
we have to figure out how to do that overseas. That may not be so practical.
I know. I was thinking that. I'm thinking, well, I'm going to put my order in, but I don't really fancy sending it all the way back to the States.
Well, we'll just fly to the States next.
Here's a thought. Here's an idea. Maybe I'll put this aside. You know, for people who order the audiobook, which you can't order now, but it's going to be an audiobook. I read it all myself. I just heard the whole master tape the other day. An audiobook or an ebook, both of those, you can't sign an ebook, and we're not going to sign audiobooks. It's digital. So we said for people who pre-order those, what we'll do is, instead of signing a physical book, we will print out a color copy of the cover and send that off.
Perfect.
Yeah, like a certificate.
Perfect. That would be awesome.
Yeah. Maybe we can do that for overseas readers of the hardcover.
Yeah, or even like a postcard with the gold medal on it and the signature. That
You're giving me extra homework. I like that.
Yeah, but I think that would be wonderful, because I'd love to pin that up on my notice board on every show. They're going to see.
In the last chapter of the book, not to give anything away, but the journalist, the chef produces a little card on which there are the 7 rules of the kitchen on one side and the recipe for living on the other side. And we'll have this card on our website.
There you go. I love it. That's going to be superb. So what next after the recipe? What else are you working on, or is it a secret?
It's not a secret. It's an open book. I mean, there are some secrets, but and if I told you, I'd have to, well, but I can tell you a few things. Next spring, Bob Berg and I have another Go Giver book coming out.
Oh,
amazing.
Wow.
This one features not only people, but also a large dog and a small cat. I can't say more. The dog's name is Solomon. That's all I can say. I've already said too much. And so that's going to be fun. That's called the Go Giver Influencer, and that's already up on Amazon, and that's coming out in the spring, in April. We're very, very excited about that. And on the recipe front, if this book does well enough, if it makes enough of a splash, and we feel like it found its readership in the world, then Charles and I may revisit Owen's universe in the recipe world, and there's another story that I think is waiting to be told there. So there's no end of stories. There's more books coming.
I know. We've got so many ideas going around in our heads, because I mean our audience, if you like, is people 50 plus who are looking to retire, who maybe can't retire because things haven't worked out economically the way they anticipated.
Yes.
We believe there's a story in that. We're just not sure how we're going to write that story.
We've got to come up with an idea.
So we got to come up.
Well, these things are of bubbling to the surface. By the way, to Michael, who just put on the chat, how about exclusive recipes?
Yes.
I like that. You're thinking. We are going to put, of course, on the website all the recipes that are in the print book, because those recipes aren't all going to be in the audio book, although they are in the ebook. But exclusive recipes, interesting. We've got video footage of Charles cooking some of the recipes in the book.
Oh, wow.
And myself eating those. Charles even does make an omelet, but blindfolded, and does a pretty decent job of it. And also a video of myself interviewing him, and those are going to be, those are part of the pre-order offer, and we'll probably get those up on the website eventually. But yes, well, Michael's idea of the exclusive recipes, we'll have to play around with that.
Yeah.
So you just think,
let's have a video book.
Yeah, I mean, you just think about this, how different books are now.
Yeah.
And promotions of books are now compared to what they were 20, 30, 40, 50 years ago.
Great challenge of self-publishing. Self-publishing, now we have the technology and the platforms so that logistically creating and producing and even distributing a book yourself isn't all that difficult. The challenge of self-publishing is very different from the challenge of traditional publishing. Mm-hmm. The challenge of traditional publishing is how to get in. The challenge of self-publishing is easy to get in, you just do it. The challenge there is quality. 99% of self-published books they may be great ideas in the book, but the presentation is awful. There's so many poorly formatted, badly designed, not spell checked, not edited, it's not the right title, it's a bad cover. It's just, it's like when the Macintosh first came out and all of a sudden everybody and his mother was producing brochures and flyers, and they all looked like ransom notes by psychotic people. So the self-published marketplace is just awash with books that probably a lot of them could have been great books, but they're not. They don't have professional presentation, and that's sad to me. It's up to all of us to raise that bar. So that is. But you're right. What you can do now with books is phenomenal. I mean,
the internet,
so fluid and flexible.
I mean, it's the internet. When you combine the book with the internet and the way that you can combine the two together, and social media as well,
it can be a conversation.
Made a huge difference. I know when we self-published our first book, 2012 we published that, but we made sure that we went to, even though we were self-publishing, that we got cover designed professionally, because it makes all the difference. And it had to say on the cover, the message had to come over what was inside.
Yes.
And it was very, very hard for us because
we couldn't come up with those ideas.
We're just not like that. You know, we could write the book from our experience. It was the mindset shift from employee to home business entrepreneur.
Yes, great subject.
Designed to be for an entrepreneur going from the traditional job or even their own business like our own, the transition you have to go through to being responsible for everything. And we had to, we had a friend of ours wrote it with us. She was an NLP expert. And we went into all the psychology of it and fear and the mindset shifts and all that sort of thing.
Yeah.
And we want to do the same sort of thing with the retirement story.
Ah, yeah. Great. Fantastic.
Because it is very scary. And the reason why
there's a little bit of a market for that, just a little bit of a market for that. A couple of billion people. Yeah, I think that's a great idea.
It is. And we've tested it, you know, and I'm sharing this with you because you've got so much more experience than we have. But we started testing it with an ebook, and we started putting some posts out on Facebook. We interacted with a post recently that Robert Kiyosaki had put up about baby boomers holding the market for the future and how we can become entrepreneurs. The internet's given us this, but there was so much negative stuff. It's like, no, I'm never going to be able to retire. Well, don't be stupid. I can't run a business. I don't understand the internet. Why are you even suggesting that I could do this? I've just got to put up with my lot. I was really scared by how much people are affected by this. It's the fear. Yeah. But we wouldn't be here now on this show with you if we'd been in that position. We've been in that position. We've had some terrible stuff happen and we had to do something about it. And we know there's a solution. And entrepreneurship, seriously, in our minds, gives you freedom financially, but it gives you a whole new life and a whole new look at life. And that,
who was this wonderful writer? I'm right now blanking on her name, but Joan Didion. Joan Didion, the novelist, once wrote, "I write to find out what I think," and I love that because that's really what happens often for me. I don't know what whether it's an email or a blog post or a book. My thoughts, I'm not even quite sure what my views or my opinions are until I'm kind of having them come out through my fingers. And I go, oh yeah, I guess I do. I realize that. And we do that often in teaching or in presentation. We say something on stage and we suddenly realize, wow, I didn't even realize that, but that's true. That's a good thought that I just had. That's when I first got involved with the world of network marketing and the world of personal development. One of the first things I started to learn about was this business of self-talk. And it's interesting, when I work with Brandon Webb, the Navy SEAL sniper, and we're on our 5th book now, and he was, after his tour in Afghanistan, and he'd done a couple of tours overseas, he came back and he was tapped to help revamp the whole Navy SEAL sniper training program and to update it for the 21st century. This is in 2003. And he and a friend, Eric Davis, basically rewrote the Navy SEAL sniper training program and produced a whole new generation of snipers. And Brandon says the most significant change he brought to the program was a course in mental management, a central part of which was looking at self-talk. He said, this is not some woo-woo, out there pop psychology thing. This is Navy SEAL snipers in combat we're talking about. And they're dealing with imagery and self-talk. What I learned back in 1980 was I taught myself to start saying out loud the things that were in my head. I don't do this when I'm walking down the street generally, because arrest might be in my future, but when I'm alone in my room, I'll say what I'm thinking. And I developed the habit of talking to myself out loud. And I was shocked at the words coming out of my mouth, at the negativity, at the defeatism, at the I can't do this, at the I don't know how this is going to work. It's, oh, I have no clue. I have no idea. This is terrible. I was amazed. And I still do it. And I still hear the words come out, but the beauty of verbalizing it is that you find out what you think. And when you find out what you think, then you can change it. And when you change what you think, when you change what you're telling yourself every day, over and over again, day after day, it completely changes what you do, and it changes the results that you get. I mean, Joan Didion is absolutely right. I talk to find out what I think. I write to find out what I think. As Aunt Elle says in The Go-Giver Leader, I think that we live to find out who we are. It's in the doing of it and in the speaking of it that we kind of are revealed. But I think that business of what we tell ourselves, what we say to ourselves, it's so powerful. It's so important. Mm-hmm. And so I love the message of this book that you guys want to write. I hope, and I'm sure you'll find the avenue for it. And all the folks who are saying, "Oh, I'll never do that," well, they'll either keep saying that or they won't.
It's true.
Yeah, you're absolutely right. Because I mean, one of the most frightening things we found is that when you start to talk to people about their retirement, they've got their head buried in the sand and they actually don't want to think about it. They just go, "Oh, it'll be all right."
Yeah, it won't.
And it won't. It won't. And it was funny. It's what sort of our friends and family said to us when, we said we've got to do something after we were sort of giving up, trying to get the idea of giving up our consultancy and accountancy business.
Yeah.
And we were saying, we've got this huge problem because 2008 we put all our money into property, and of course,
yes.
we all know that. And they just said, "It'll be all right. Just keep on doing what you're doing. It'll be all right."
When people say it'll work itself out, it'll be okay, something I often feel like saying back is, "Well, have you ever seen gravity make things fall up?"
No, I like that. Oh, I'm going to remember that one.
There's this thing in the universe called entropy, which is the tendency of systems to disorganize spontaneously. If you leave rooms get messier by themselves, they don't get neater by themselves. You have to organize them for that to happen. Yes. Gravity makes things roll downhill. It doesn't make things fall up. You can throw things up in the air, but you have to use and that's the same thing with retirement. It can be great, but we've got to take the action for that to happen. Yeah.
I'm thinking a recipe for retirement might be.
I see what's happening here. I see what's going on now.
No, but you're inspiring me. I'm getting ideas. I'm like that. I should probably be awake in the night writing down stuff. So
I'll tell you when I write I have two modes of writing. 95% of what I do is at my computer, and I'm revising or expanding or elaborating on something I already have. I've got material that I'm but this 5% is coming up with something brand new. It's the beginning of something, whether it's a blog post or a book. It's the sitting literally with a pad of blank paper. Here it is, sitting with this pad and with this pen, and I'll be sitting down over on that chair back there in the corner with a cup of hot tea, and I'll do this first thing in the morning. This only works for me, or works best for me, before breakfast, before email, before anything. My computer's off. I get up, I got a cup of hot tea. I'll usually go through 3 cups of hot tea. And that pad of paper, I will fill from 1 to 1.5 pages of a pad. And that's only like 100 words. It's not much, but that will be the birth of a chapter or a book or whatever. You have to start, you have to start somewhere.
And I think that's it, isn't it?
Yeah.
You have to start somewhere. And it doesn't matter what you're doing in life. You have to start.
Yeah. It's really true.
Oh, it's just been brilliant having you on the show, and I'm sure we're going to get loads of comments. I'll pick them all off and I'll answer them on Facebook.
I have a burning question for you, Susan.
Go on then.
I've been watching this wardrobe right behind you.
Yeah.
And I want to know, if I walk in there, will I be in Narnia?
Probably not.
No. What do you think?
I'm thinking maybe.
There you go.
I'm just saying, that's what it feels like. I'm looking at this from across the Atlantic.
Yeah.
Looking to me like I may find Tumnus in there.
You may well. You'll just have to wait and see.
I will.
There's another wardrobe that way that you can't see.
Maybe I'll get to Chicago through that one. I don't know.
That's so funny. But no, seriously, thank you so much for joining us tonight, and it really has been an absolute honor. So I'm going to repeat for everybody here the two websites. To find out about the recipe, you need to go to the ingredientsofgreatness.com. To find out more about John here, you can go to johndavidmann.com. I will go and put all the links in social media. I'll answer all of your questions because I love to be talking with our guests rather than answering comments and stuff on Facebook at the same time. And I think it's very discourteous to do that. So I will catch up with all of those afterwards. And thank you everyone for joining us. And if you were not with us live tonight, then I hope that you will enjoy the replay. Do let us know if you have any comments for John on that, and we can pass them on. And yeah, we're looking forward now to talking with the very famous chef himself, which is going to be awesome. And I want to be invited into his kitchen because I think that would be pretty cool. So anyway, thank you so much. Thank you for everyone for watching. Do you have any final words for anyone before you go, John?
I just want to say you two are wonderful hosts, and I appreciate so much the chance to be here. Thank you.
No, thank you so much.
Thank you, yeah.
If you'd like to hold on when we finish this, just got a couple of questions for you after we finish, if you don't mind. So thank you, everyone, and good night from Chris and myself, and we'll see you on the next show.
Yeah, good night.
Bye.
Trouble is what's going to happen.
You're welcome, Michael Patterson.